What is going on, everyone? Happy Wednesday. Welcome into GC Live at the buzzer with your host, Jack Veltri. Appreciate you guys hopping on, tuning in on this Wednesday morning. We have got a lot to talk about today. South Carolina men's and women's basketball talk for the next hour here with yours truly. Going to be a lot of fun. The Gamecocks, men's and women's, both have been playing a lot better lately. The women picked up a 71-57 win over NC State on Sunday in the Alley tip-off out in Charlotte. And as for the men, picked up a big 80-54 win over Towson yesterday at Colonial Life Arena. And so we're going to be breaking down both these games. We'll be also looking ahead to what's next for these teams. Obviously, the men go to Indiana this weekend for a huge, can't understate that word, huge early season matchup out in Bloomington. And then the women are back at home for their home opener tomorrow night against Coppin State. And so we've got a lot to talk about on both ends. But before we get rolling, let's talk about our main sponsor of the day, right above me here, Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans. So if you're like me, you're living in an apartment and you're looking to potentially take the next step and maybe buy a home, or you're in the process of just looking for a home in general, or you need help with your mortgage, any housing needs, give our guy Clint Hammond a call. He's been in the mortgage industry for a very long time now. He's a lifelong Gamecock fan, and he's also a supporter of Gamecocks Central and all of our GC Live programs. You'll always see his name right above us here on our GC Live program. So that's more than enough reason to go at least check him out. So if you want to do so, give him a call, 803-422-6797. The NMLS number for him is 71597, or you can also go to ClintHammond.com. So again, you're looking to take those steps and you don't know where to start, Clint is your guy to get in contact with, and he will definitely help you out through the process of all those housing needs. So thank you so much to Clint for being a wonderful sponsor of Gamecock Central. So the basic format for today, we're going to be talking about the women first. We'll be talking about them with NC State. We'll be looking ahead to their next matchup against Coppin State. And then we're going to turn things over to the men for the rest of the show. We'll be talking about the game last night against Towson. And then we'll be looking ahead to the big matchup, which, part of the title of this video or this stream was, can men's basketball get the statement win at Indiana? And that's the big question. Can they do it? Because, look, they lost to North Florida to start the year. They obviously need to get a big Q1 type win, because a quad 4 loss does not look good right now on the resume, even with South Carolina playing a little bit better lately. But obviously, the Gamecocks need as many big wins as they can get. So let's go ahead and dive right into what happened on Sunday out in Charlotte. Like I said before, number 1 South Carolina beat number 9 NC State in a Final Four rematch from last year out in Charlotte. And look, this is a good win for South Carolina. Like, again, they got really battle tested against Michigan out in Vegas. As we all know, that game was a lot closer than I think anyone really anticipated, but they found a way to win. That's the important thing. And now they had a chance to go back out here and, no pun intended, rebound and beat a good NC State team that obviously you beat to get to the national title last year. But obviously NC State, the Wolfpack, are a very good, solid team, just like South Carolina is. Now, the one thing a lot of people were interested to see in this game was the return of Ashlyn Watkins, and that was going to be a big thing because, look, she got cleared to play last week, and then it wasn't like a sure thing that she was going to be playing against the Wolfpack. Like, I think a lot of people thought, like, oh, she'll probably play soon here because, who knows how she's been doing with how much basketball training she's gotten in, the type of shape she's in. But she did play on Sunday. She played 19 minutes, 6 points, 3-7 shooting, 6 rebounds. She didn't start, but I think I would expect her to start at some point here in the near future. But I think for the Gamecocks, they got a lot better playing this game. Tahina Paopao had 23 points on 10 of 16 shooting, 3 of 7 from deep. That is good to see. But there's also struggles in this game. Like, Joyce Edwards, for as talented as she had as many points or as many turnovers as she did points. So she had 8 turnovers in this game, which is a really high number. And that is not exactly ideal. Again, it's early and it's her first year at the college level. So it's going to happen, right? These early games, she's going to be tested, and again, against good teams, she might suffer a little bit at times. She might make some mistakes. So that was certainly the case on Sunday. Do I expect that to be the case all year? No. She's going to develop, move along. Again, she's also in a starting role for South Carolina right now, so it's going to happen where there's going to be some bumps in the road. But I thought outside of that tonight, Fagan had 8 rebounds and seemed to play a little bit better. Raven Johnson had 9 rebounds, and the scoring wasn't anything like great from the starters besides Pow Pow. But off the bench, I mean, Malaysia Fulwiley, 18 points on 8 of 14 shooting in 18 minutes, which, again, she continued ever since her first game at South Carolina when they went to Paris last year. I mean, she has just been a stud for this team. And she's a big part of why the Gamecocks were able to win the title last year and why they're off to a 2-0 start this year. So you definitely would like to see South Carolina continue to play well with her out there. But I think now moving forward, it's going to be a lot tougher for South Carolina, like Coppin State this weekend or tomorrow, and then ECU. And then it's at Clemson, and that will definitely be, Clemson, South Carolina should win that game, no problem. But then it gets tougher with, going to UCLA, Iowa State at home. It's going to be tough, but that's always how it is with the non-conference league because that's how Dawn schedules. So big win for the lady game, or for, I shouldn't even say that, but big win for the women's team. And yeah, 50% shooting. You'd like to be better from deep. You'd like to limit the turnovers. 20 of them on the game. At the same time, though, you saw the same deal with NC State. 21 turnovers for NC State. That is, it's sloppy. That's the best way to put it. But at the end of the day, you were able to outscore the Wolfpack in every quarter except the final one when you were outscored 14-13. But overall, good night good afternoon for the Gamecocks, and definitely a big win for them. Now looking a little bit ahead to Thursday, that is going to be their home opener against Coppin State. Again, they should roll to a win there. That's one of those you pay to play type games, like gimme games. South Carolina should have no problems in that game. I'm interested to see if they'll do like a ring ceremony or anything. I would expect them to. Obviously, you'll have the championship banner from last year going up, so that should be a good time. And we'll have all coverage on Gamecock Central. Our writer Chris Wellbaum will be over there, and it should be a good night for South Carolina and a game that's it's not as stressful, right? These first 2 games have been a little bit more stressful. Like NC State's a good team. Michigan played really well against this team. So I think it just shows that kind of everyone is out hunting to beat this team. They want to be the first to say they beat South Carolina, the defending champs, the team that went undefeated last year, perfect season, this and that. I think that is going to be that's the target on South Carolina's back this year is when's the slip up going to happen? And look, it hasn't happened so far. Dawn Staley was kind of saying the other day, I can't remember the exact quote, but it was essentially, I'm paraphrasing here, along the lines of the fact of look, it's going to be tough to go perfect this year. That is truly the case. You're going to get your best shot from a lot of different teams, and teams are going to be coming after you trying to win in these games against South Carolina. So, it's up to South Carolina in that sense to limit the turnovers, play their brand of basketball, and just don't beat themselves. That's the way I feel like if they do lose a game this year, it would probably end up being because, look, teams might outplay you once or twice, but for the most part, there are going to be games where South Carolina's going to, hurt themselves with turnovers and other mistakes. And, in some cases like the NC State game, you can get by with 20 turnovers, but let's say you're in the thick of it on the road in a hostile SEC environment, like when you go to Texas in February, for instance, like that might bite you in the butt a little bit. But for now, everything's all good. 2-0 on the year. Good start for the women's team, and yeah, they're off and rolling. So let's get into the men's side of things now. South Carolina men's basketball. Again, we just talked about the women's team. So if you missed any of it, after the stream's over, you can go ahead and uh, watch the replay of this, or this will also be posted on all podcast platforms. So definitely go ahead and check that out. And if you haven't already, go ahead and give this stream a thumbs up. And if you're enjoying what you're seeing, of course, and then also make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as GamecockCentral.com if you're not already a subscriber. But the men's team last night, I was out at CLA covering that game yesterday. Man, was it nice to see this team get a big victory, and big in the sense of like you didn't beat you didn't beat the top team in the country, but you beat a team that, look, Towson's not a bad team by any means. I mean, there's a reason why the spread on this game was South Carolina favored by 7.5 points. It just makes sense that, look, Towson went down to the wire with a very good St. Mary's team, which has always been good out in the WCC conference. Like, that is what to expect. Like, Towson is a good team. They were picked as the favorites to win the CAA this year, and that's in the same conference as teams like Hofstra and Charleston are in. So it might seem like South Carolina didn't play anyone last night, but this is a quality team they were playing. And again, like I said, the spread on the game, it was 7.5 points, and South Carolina made it look like it should have been a lot more as they picked up an 80-54 win at Colonial Life Arena last night. And I think the thing that you have to start with this team was they really got off to a strong start, right? I think defensively, they held the Tigers in check. I mean, they started, 0 of 10 from three-point range before they hit their first three-point shot with like 6.5 minutes left to go in the first half. That right there just showed that, like, hey, like, this defense has come to play today, and it allowed the offense to kind of get into a little bit of a rhythm. Like, did they hit every shot in that first half? No. Did it take a little bit of time to get going? Yes. Did they still have some turnovers in the first half? Yes. Like, there were some mistakes made in the early going. South Carolina, the one thing that did hurt them last night, that just in general, not just in the first half, but 15 turnovers. I mean, you got to be better than that. 10 of them came in the second half. 5 of them did come in the early minutes of the first half there. And I thought as the half went on, South Carolina was fine and didn't make a ton of mistakes. Instead, it was the defense forcing mistakes by Towson. I thought it was good from that aspect, but you'd like to be a little better with some of the sloppiness. I think that needs to be minimized a bit because, look, you see when South Carolina last year, when they were playing at their tempo, I mean, they weren't making a ton of mistakes. They weren't turning the ball over a metric ton, and instead it was the defense going out there and forcing the other teams to do something extreme and make a mistake. So that's what you want to see from South Carolina. It hasn't really been that way so far this year. I feel like maybe things are playing a little too quick for them to start the year, but maybe I'm just wrong on that. But I will say they shot 62.5% from the field to start the night. That was really good to see in the first half. Like, a lot of shots were falling for this team. And by halftime, I mean, the game was pretty much out of hand. I mean, that was clearly obvious. I thought Nick Pringle got off to a good start last night. We'll talk about him here in a second. Colin Murray-Boyles had another electric game last night, 27 points for him. And he almost had another double-double. And then can we give some flowers to Jacoby Wright? I mean, he has been a star for this team so far. Shout out Fort Mill. The Fort Mill native, 16 points last night, 5 of 11 shooting, 3 of 7 from three-point range. Is it safe to say that Jacoby's probably, as of right now at least, the best shooter on this team, the most reliable one, I think, because, look, he's always been that guy that's come off the bench and he's played a lot of minutes, but he hadn't started much last year. I think he only started one game when Michi Johnson was out, and Otherwise, he was the sixth man off the bench, but he came off the bench the first game. And then these last two games, he's been in the starting lineup and he's performed very well. And I think it's something, as long as he continues to play well, he's going to hold on to. And I don't see any reason why he can't, because number one, he's a great shooter. He's a great player. He just seems to give the offense a lot more life when he's out there. And that brings me to the point of, I don't feel like we've seen a lot of good from the other guards out there. Like Jamari Thomas, he's been fine so far. Like his first two games were pretty good, and he's playing decent defense. So I can't really knock him much at all. But I mean, he only had 6 points last night, and he only took one shot, which he missed. So that in itself, you'd like to see a guy that, South Carolina has to replace Michi Johnson and Talon Cooper, two guys that can go out there and score. You'd like to see Jamari, who came from Norfolk State, was the MEAC Player of the Year last year. He averaged almost 17 points a game last year. You'd like to see more of that, but at the same time, he does other things to kind of make up for maybe a night where he's just not scoring a ton. Other guys, I mean, look, I feel like some of these other guards didn't take a ton of shots last night. Like Zach Davis only had 2 points on 1 of 4 shooting. Morris Ugasuk had 1 3-pointer, and that was it. Arden Conyers got in the late minutes, and Cam Scott went 0 for 3. I'll say this. Cam, I think, is going to be fine. He's like a great, talented player. It's just, kind of like Joyce Edwards here. There are going to be some times where there's struggles, especially in the early going, but you'd rather get them out of the way now, so that way when SEC play comes around, he's ready to go, and he'll be playing a lot better. But I think Jacoby's been great. You'd like to see more from these other guards. Miles Studi only had 5 points last night in 27 minutes. I feel like that's got to be better. But again, it's just very early in the season, and I think once they get more comfortable, I thought they played a lot more comfortable last night for one. The energy was good. The effort was there. Things will fall in line eventually. The shots are going to come, and the fact that they were able to win by 26 points last night, despite not having the greatest performances from some of your other guys on the team, you're fine. And you only needed the big three with CMB, Pringle, and Wright to have the nights that they did to be able to win this game pretty handily. And speaking of those big nights, Nick Pringle, big night for him. 15 points, 6 of 8 shooting, 9 rebounds, almost had a double-double. I thought he looked a lot better last night. He obviously had struggled, I think, a little bit in those first 2 games. Like the first game, I mean, I was the only other one I've been at because I was at Vanderbilt last weekend for football, and South Carolina was playing that Friday night against SC State, so I wasn't there. But, I'm following along with the game, and just like Pringle, I mean, he got fouled so much early in that North Florida game that he got sent to the free throw line so many times, and he missed a bunch. And I think that kind of set the tone for like a not great night for him. But last night, I thought, again, this is the case for him and CMB. There was a lot more aggression. They played much more physical in the paint, I feel like, and they used their size to their advantage. Again, I don't think Towson, they're a fine team, but when you look at the matchups, I don't think they really matched up well with South Carolina in terms of size and ability. And I think that's where the Gamecocks really were able to shine in this game, was playing well in the paint. And again, you get games like that last night where your guys are going out there and combining for 18 rebounds and 42 points. That is going to be a recipe for success. Now, can that be done every game? I mean, Lamont Parents doesn't seem to think that's going to be an easy recipe to repeat over and over again. There are going to be games where you might get one guy in sync, the other might not have the greatest night. But on a night where you can get those two going in the front court, that's going to make things a lot more challenging on defenses. And I've said this a few times now, talking on 107.5 The Game and last night with my fast break reaction. That's going to force teams to go ahead and have to decide, okay, do we try to guard the inside a little bit more, or do we give up a few shots here and now? What is the trade-off of what you do? I think that's kind of the question that teams are going to have to face when they're going up against Pringle and CMB, because if they play like they did last night, I think it's like, have fun stopping them. They're going to be a real tough duo, and that is what this team needed. Going back to last year, again, I'm not trying to talk too much about last year because the team's a little bit different, but it's hard not to recognize the fact that CMB didn't really have a ton of help around him with another guy that could go with him in the front court. Yeah, he had, BJ Mack was like more like a three, in my opinion. You had, Stephen Clark, you had uh, BBV, guys like that. But you didn't have, and you had Josh Gray, but you didn't have that big time threat like CMB that can be the duo, right? And Pringle is supposed to be that guy for South Carolina, and we saw that last night. I think we saw what these two guys can do when they play together, and it can be really special when they're both clicking. Again, it can make things really challenging for opposing defenses. So that's all good. Other things from last night that kind of stood out. Like I said, the turnovers were just a bit much, especially in that second half. But again, you were up by so many points that it didn't even really matter too much. But when you play teams like the one you're going to play on Saturday, we'll talk about that here in a second. You have to be able to not have so many silly mistakes. I mean, a lot of these turnovers are just, they're not good. I mean, Jamari Thomas turned the ball over 5 times last night. CMB had turned over 3 times. So it's not a huge deal, but in these bigger games, especially once you get to SEC play in a little bit here, it might be a little bit more costly. But and then Jeff 2001 brings up a good point that I was going to bring up eventually. Like you said, 107.5 the game. A lot of fouls called in that second half. Oh my gosh, tell me about it. I mean, the foul calls were just. It's not even in the fact that they were ridiculous. It's the amount that were just like stacking up crazily enough. That first half, to put into perspective, Towson only took 6 free throw shots, made 3 of them in the first half. The second half, though, 14 of 23 at the free throw line. I mean, what is going on with the foul calls, man? Like, Pat Adams was the main ref last night, and he's got that, that background, that notoriety that, like, hey, this is going to be a game where a lot of fouls are called, so just expect it. And I think that's what we saw last night in that second half. Like, this game was flying by, and then South Carolina's already up by 20 points, and it's like all these fouls are being called. Like, come on, man. And it's not all him, because there's other officials out there with him. There's 2 of them, in fact, besides him. But the point is, a lot of fouls were called last night, and that's not to say South Carolina didn't have its fair share of free throws. I mean, look, they had 30 of them last night, 22 of 30 at the line. Much better performance for them. At the charity strike, 73%, much better. I will give them that. But man, this game was just a drag last night at times, with the fact of, like, every time it was like second half, foul, timeout, foul, timeout. It's like, come on, y'all. It's a Tuesday night. Like, South Carolina's up by a bunch of points. They're not blowing this lead. Let's move the game along. But I get it. It's their job. They got to call fouls, and if they see it for what it is, sure. But a lot of these tic-tac fouls are just, they kind of get, a little bit much, especially when, not a lot of fouls were called in the first half. But so overall, final thoughts from this game before we move on. Good win for the Gamecocks last night, one that they desperately needed. And it was a good one for them, because, look, Towson, in terms of what type of win this is for the Gamecocks, I'd probably classify it as a quad. Again, I can't be 100% sure on this, but I would say it's somewhere around, it's probably a quad 4 right now, but there is the off chance that maybe Towson runs the table and still wins the CAA by year's end. Maybe it becomes a quad 3. And again, North Florida also just lost to Georgia yesterday. So that loss for the Gamecocks to open the season is looking a lot worse right now. But you can only control what you can control, and you got some opportunities moving ahead to kind of rectify things and get back on track and make that early season loss not really count for much, right? Because, look, that quad 4 loss to North Florida is going to hang over their heads the rest of the year, whether you like it or not. And it's really up to South Carolina to kind of make sure that that game was just a one-off and that it really doesn't matter. And I mean, Lamont did say yesterday, like, had South Carolina come back to win that game against North Florida, he just doesn't know if the team would have received the message the way they have since then, because the energy and effort is a lot different now. It's a lot better. And so maybe it's a blessing in disguise that they did lose that game. You obviously don't want to lose to a team like that, but it was just one of those nights where the effort was a lot better from North Florida. They wanted it more, and they were shooting pretty well. So, give credit to them for that one game. But now South Carolina seems to be kind of on a little bit of a roll. But the real test is going to come Saturday when they head to Assembly Hall in Bloomington to face the number 16 ranked in the Indiana Hoosiers. And this is going to be a really tough game for South Carolina. Again, the odds are not in their favor for this game. I think ESPN yesterday had South Carolina with like a 25% chance to win that game. And even on KenPom, KenPom's got South Carolina losing this game 74-68 and a 29% chance to win that game. So it's going to be a tough one. I think these teams are evenly matched in some ways. I think in terms of like records and stuff over the years and how they've played. But this one's going to be in Bloomington. No Indiana football this weekend, so they're on a bye week. So should be a packed house out there at Assembly Hall, and for a Saturday afternoon tip at 3 p.m. on Peacock. So if you don't have Peacock on streaming already, I'd suggest going ahead, figuring out how to get it, and maybe do a free trial or something. That's probably what I'll be doing on my end, but I'm not even sure if I have a subscription for Peacock. But this is an Indiana team that I think this is a make or break year. It feels like for Mike Woodson and company. Like the Hoosiers, this is not your Bob Knight type team or anything, or those teams that would win national championships, go to deep into the NCAA tournament every year. This is a team that it's taken a little bit of time, but it seems like they've got a good group this year, and they have a real chance to make some noise. And I think it starts with Mackenzie. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. M'Baku. He has been, again, take this all with a grain of salt. It's a 2-game sample size, but the guy's averaging 24.5 points and 8 rebounds a game. And he's shooting 66% from 3-point range. He's been really solid so far. And again, Indiana has not played anyone noteworthy, to say the least. But, hey, good shooters are good shooters. And for being a 6'9" forward, shooting as well as he has, he's been money from 3-point range. And he's collecting a lot of rebounds. He's going to be a tough matchup, I think, for a guy like Nick Pringle, or I would imagine he probably goes up against maybe CMB. We'll have to see, because they also have Omar Ballo, who has been big piece for them. 7-foot senior. We've heard a lot about this guy. He has been solid for this team. 8 of 10 shooting on Sunday against Eastern Illinois, 17 points. And even before that, in Indiana's home opener last Wednesday, 15 points on 6 of 10 shooting. And Ballo had 3 blocks the other day against Eastern Illinois. So I would expect, matchup-wise, Ballo probably goes up against Nick Pringle. And then I would expect, M'Baku to go up against probably CMB. And that is going to be where the toughest matchups are in this game, at least in my opinion. Like, those are going to be where this game is won and lost. Can CMB and Pringle replicate what they did last night? Can they kind of contain what Indiana is so well at, which is, they have a great front court. Like, those are 2 guys that are really solid players over there. So that'll be interesting to see how that matchup works. But the rest of this team, they're pretty good too. I feel like guard wise, I'm looking at their numbers here. They haven't had a great play from their guards. I feel like South Carolina can probably match up pretty well there. But again, it is those forwards, and that is going to be where this game is really decided, at least in my opinion. This is a real big test for the Gamecocks. Right out of the gate, you're in Bloomington. How do you play this game? Like, what do you need to do to win this game is probably the next question to be asked here. In my opinion, it starts with playing fast. It starts with getting off to a quick start and playing great defense. I think we saw last night, Lamont Paris pointed this out. Pringle, Wright, they all pointed it out in post-game press conferences. the help defense was a lot better. I thought they did a pretty good job containing from the perimeter against Towson, and they also did a great job of not letting up easy shots or anything. I mean, were there some times where the Tigers hit shots? Yes, but I think it was more attributed to the fact that they had to take tough shots and hit them. And that's kind of what we saw last night. So that's what you're going to need to do against this Indiana team that I've watched some of them now. They seem to play pretty quick. Again, they're going to rely on their bigs to win this game. But I think if South Carolina is going to get the job done, you're going to get another good performance from CMB and Pringle. And that's what it's going to have to take. So should be a really intriguing matchup. And after this, I mean, look, it's one game, but it is a really big test for South Carolina. It's a chance to prove that you get this win on Saturday on the road, automatic quad one win. Automatic. Going to Assembly Hall, that will hold a lot of weight for the rest of the season, I think. Even if Indiana doesn't have a great year, when you beat them at the time, it's like that's a huge win. And like you really can't afford to. You can lose this game, obviously, but in the grand scheme of things, you don't have a ton of other games in non-conference play to where it's like, yeah, you can afford a slip up. Like you already had your slip up against North Florida. After this, you have Xavier out in the Fort Myers tournament. You're going to either be playing Michigan or Virginia Tech after that out in Fort Myers. You're going on the road to Boston College, a team that you should beat. And then you get Clemson at home on December 17th. So you have a few games to really make up for the fact that you lost that quad 4 game to start the year to North Florida. Same time, if you start losing to Indiana, Xavier, it's like your best chances to pick up quality wins against potential quad 1 opponents, it's kind of out the window. I mean, once you get to SEC play, and I've heard a lot of people say this, like if South Carolina just runs the table in SEC play and takes care of business, they'll be fine. That could be the case, but you shouldn't have to bank on South Carolina just doing well in SEC play. They should be able to pick up some of these big wins in non-conference play. So I think between Indiana, Xavier, Michigan/Virginia Tech, and Clemson, ideally you'd like to win 3 out of the 4. I very well could see them splitting those games. I think they'll probably split 1-1 out in Fort Myers and then probably split one of Indiana and Clemson. But I also could see them going into Bloomington this weekend with a little bit more momentum now. It's a big thing. They have some momentum going in there and pulling off a stunner. That's really what it would be, in my opinion. Like I feel like a lot of people, obviously Ken Palm's not high on South Carolina. I mean, they haven't projected to finish 15-15 this year. And again, that's a computer saying that. But ESPN's not giving them much of a chance. I'm sure the betting odds for this game are probably in Indiana's favor, especially being at home. But it's a big type of statement game for this program to see what they're really made of. Because over the years, I feel like we haven't seen South Carolina play the big time road games, challenge themselves in non-conference play. And that's a little bit attributed to the fact of in the first 2 years of the LP era, you wanted South Carolina to get some wins, get some momentum. And that was done by playing, teams that weren't exactly great. Like last year, for instance, Clemson was the best game in the non-conference slate, and you lost that game. And the rest of the games you won because you didn't play great teams, in my opinion. That's just my take. This year, the schedule's a lot tougher in non-conference play. There are much more challenges. If you're going out here and winning 3 of these 4 games that I just talked about, I feel like you're set up pretty well for going into SEC play where, again, you can pick up a lot of great wins in conference play, and that might be enough. Maybe you get 15, 16, 17. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the overall record here, but you could probably get somewhere between 10 to 12 wins and feel pretty good about where you're at in conference play. But if you don't do anything in non-con, is it going to make that much of a difference? We'll have to see. But you definitely would like South Carolina to at least come out of non-conference play, maybe with at most 3 to 4 losses. I think that would be an ideal number. But again, that would probably mean you lose maybe 2 games over this next little stretch here over the next month or so. So we'll have to see what happens. But it is going to be a real chance for the Gamecocks. Go out here, beat one of the blue bloods in college basketball, a Big Ten team on national, I say national television, but national streaming television, and get a signature win, a statement win, as the title reads, to really start to kick off the 2024-25 men's basketball season. So should be a lot of fun. We'll have all coverage on GamecockCentral.com. So that should be a great matchup to keep up with. And it'll be going on around the same time that South Carolina plays Missouri at Williams-Brice Stadium in football. But if you're looking to still keep up with the men's basketball game that afternoon, definitely hop on GamecockCentral.com. We'll have live updates, game stories, more coverage. If you don't want to pay for streaming, definitely follow along with us. We'll be covering it from start to finish. Should be a great afternoon of basketball. So that is going to do it for GC Live at the buzzer with myself today. And I had a lot of fun talking about these two wins for South Carolina women's basketball and, of course, the men's basketball team last night at Colonial Life Arena. The women are back in action tomorrow at 7 p.m. against Coppin State, and then South Carolina men's basketball hits the road for the first time this year to face the Indiana Hoosiers, again, at Assembly Hall in Bloomington, Indiana. Big game. Let's see what happens. So be sure to stay locked into GamecockCentral.com for all basketball coverage, all football coverage. A lot more good stuff to come on the way this week with a lot going on. And we'll be back next week to be recapping South Carolina's game against Indiana. And then we'll be looking ahead to what's next for both men's and women's basketball. Until then, have a great rest of your week, guys, and I'll see you next time.